I'm Brad Roth. I'm the Executive Director of NUtech Ventures. And on behalf of NUtech Ventures and the Office of Research and Economic Development here at UNL, I want to welcome you to this workshop entitled From Intellectual Property to Startup. And this afternoon we're going to hear a variety of talks that we trust will give you an overview of some of the issues that UNL researchers will face when starting companies based on your work. And you're going to hear from the faculty founder here in a minute and about the legal aspects of starting a business, intellectual property and licensing from UNL and NUtech, conflict of interest basics, venture capital programs that are available, well, venture capital and then other programs that are available from the Nebraska Department of Economic Development, as well as resources that we have here at the Innovation Campus. We look forward to offering additional programming in the future, and we'll certainly be asking you about that in a survey after this. But we're working alongside our colleagues at the Center for Entrepreneurship and CBA, as well as with NMotion and the Law College, to put together additional programming going forward. So our first speaker to this afternoon is Dr. Shane Farritor. Dr. Farritor joined the faculty of the Department of Mechanical Engineering and Mechanical and Materials Engineering in 1998. And prior to coming to UNL, he worked in the field of space robotics laboratory at MIT and the unmanned vehicle lab at the CS Draper Laboratories. Dr. Farritor is the Chief Technical Officer and co-founder of the surgical robotics company Virtual Incision. He's also the founder of MRail, a company that's commercializing technology for railroad track monitoring and safety. Shane's also an inventor on 25 or more U.S. and international patents, as well as, 40 or so pending patents. We lose track sometimes. As well, Shane is the executive chairman on the board of advisors for the Nebraska Innovation Studio across the hall here at NIC. One of my favorite quotes from the late Dr. Stephen Covey is, "Begin with the end in mind." And that's what we're going to do today. We've asked Dr. Farritor to share with you about his experiences as an inventor, a faculty member, and a startup company founder. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Farritor.
Thank you. I think the microphone's okay. Yeah. Incredible crowd. Really happy to be here. I'm so impressed that so many of you are interested in these topics. So kudos to you and kudos to NUtech for getting this together. I started out life as a pretty standard faculty member. I always said my job description was journal papers, PhD graduates, and federal dollars. And that was the only thing that really mattered. That was kind of the currency of what we were doing. But I was interrupted in 2006-ish by an alumni who had been very successful in startups and is an advisor and wanted to contribute to the College of Engineering, and just tapped us on the shoulder and said, "This is kind of interesting research you ever started about. Have you ever thought about starting a company around this?" And the answer was no. And I curse him on even numbered days and praise him on odd numbered days. We started this path for both of our companies. So I don't know what you guys want to hear about, really. And I kept asking NUtech folks, what should I talk about? I'm not sure I landed on anything fabulous. So please interrupt and ask questions or redirect or anything you like. The other thing I want to sort of be clear about is, you wouldn't call my company successful yet. What we have done successfully is we've started. And, but you only get so much credit for starting. We got to finish some deals. And we're working on that, and I'll tell you about that as we go along.
How do you define that,
What's that?
being successful?
Well, honestly, in the startup world, again, I mentioned journal papers and PhD graduates are kind of a currency in the academic world. I think currency is a currency in the startup world. And, you can finish with a company in a few ways. You can retire from it old and gray and done wonderful things. You can sell it to someone else who's going to take it to the next level. There's lots of things people define for success. with both of my companies, I think both of them are most likely sales. M&A is the term that's used, mergers and acquisitions with larger companies who will take them to a bigger site. I think there's the possibility for a public offering on the surgical robotics company and where you make it into a big company, but that's much harder and much bigger. That's stuff I couldn't talk about in 2005 and didn't really understand all those terms and all that stuff, but I can at least, people don't laugh at me now when I say those things. So that's, I don't know how you want to define success, but most startup people would define it as, recurrency. I always have these in here. I grew up in a hardware store in central Nebraska. I'm wearing this out, but there aren't many hardware store jokes, so it's got to last another 10 years. My first company makes a sensor system that measures the quality of railroad track. This is the first of the cars that we have. We now have 5 cars out in the universe. They operate autonomously. They have a little power system. They have solar energy and they computers on board, and they have cameras and lasers that measure the shape of the rail underneath the train track. It's pretty easy to understand. If I walk around, I have some weight, and I apply a force to the floor here, and as I walk around, my finger stays a pretty constant distance from the floor, because this floor has a very even, uniform stiffness, and I don't deflect it much when I walk on the floor. If I step on a mattress, if I would stand on a mattress, I would sink in a little bit, and that would get closer to the... If you have soft track, that gets closer, we measure that. And you find soft spots in track that way. So again, this is the first of 4 or 5 cars. Bad things happen when trains derail. But this is a photograph from one of our train cars at the approach of a bridge. And this is a track where you're bending it too much, it's going to break. And therefore, we think we can provide some value to railroads by informing them and helping them prioritize maintenance and fix problem spots before bad things happen like that. Lots of problems out on railroad tracks, but this turns out to be a big deal that these broken ties break very quickly because they're made of concrete and they will fall apart quickly and you need to find them quickly. So that's one company. Now the interesting thing about this company is it's a pretty lightly regulated industry. So if I make this train car and I ask the railroad, can I move my train car out on your track? And they say, sure, you're off and running. It's there's one little rule where you have to get your remote monitoring equipment, it's called, because this car can go anywhere, and it's a little 6-page thing form you fill out and send it to the American Association of Railroads, and they say, okay, we know about your car now, you can run it around. But it's incredibly lightly regulated, and I envy a lot of startup companies with that outcome. So I think about the successful startup companies in the Haymarket. The most successful, I think, is Huddle. They manage video for mostly football teams, right? So you got a high school football team, you want to upload your video and analyze your video, and they do all that stuff. You don't have to ask anybody's permission for that. You can just kind of set up your system and do that. And the wonderful thing about that is you can sell it right away. And selling is a really, really important part of startup companies. It's really the part of startup companies. I always go back to the basics of the free market, right? I go home, when I drive home, my wife says, get milk. So I often go to a U-Stop kind of place to get milk. And I pay, $5 for a gallon of milk there. That's because I don't want to go into Hy-Vee, go way to the back, walk through the whole thing, stand in line, do that. So I can get it for $3 there, but I'm willing to pay $5. And no one forces me to go to U-Stop. I could skip it. But then I lay $5 on the table, which I earned through this job, right? And they give me milk, and they take the $5. They want the $5 more than they want the milk. I want the milk more than I want the $5. No one's forcing them to sell me the milk. No one's forcing me to buy the milk. We're both doing this freely of our own will. And that's what you got to make happen. So Huddle has to convince people that they've got a service that you should give me money for. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I think I work for my money, right? It doesn't come easily to me. So I don't give it away easily, right? If I really don't want the milk, I don't just start throwing $5 around whether or not I get the milk. So it's that's pretty important. You're going to have to make something that people are willing to give you money for. Now, it's much easier, I think, to have somebody say, oh, you're doing great work, that's really nice. But when you start handing money back and forth, it starts to take on a new level of importance. So I think that's kind of the most important thing. One of the things that I didn't think about enough when I was starting out on this, that you got to produce something of value that people can work hard with. This is just surgery robots. These are the kind of robots we make. This is our little plastic model of one of the robots that you stick inside of people and then the surgery in there. I just like showing that picture because I'm a mechanical engineer and such. Let me show you the movie. But this is the company that has probably the most patents. I think I just had to count recently for my annual faculty review, which we can talk about a little bit. But we have a lot of patents on this, and we have made a lot of robots. This is work that's been sponsored by the Army inside the university, and it formed the basis for our startup company, which made those robots that you want there. So the general path is, I do research like a faculty member that's sponsored by something. We come up with something that we think has value, and these are all the robots we've made over the years. This is 2003. This is probably an older slide. It's probably like 2014. But somewhere in here, we started to realize that these robots could work, and we worked with the university. The university owns my work when I'm a faculty member, and I produce stuff. That belongs to the university. That's part of my agreement as a faculty member. And we work with people like Brad and UNIMED at the Med Center, because this work is done at both campuses. And they make an agreement with us that we can now market this technology. And it might not be us, it's really the agreements with the corporation that we formed. And the corporation has shareholders and it has a board of directors and all those sorts of things. It's not just me. And then we are able to market, or try to attempt to market these sorts of things. Patents are probably one of the things that I've done the most work with in the startup company things. So, any questions so far? I don't want to talk to, I already talked a lot about me, and faculty members talk about me a lot, right? Yeah?
Have you been involved in a patent infringement case yet?
No, I've not been involved in a patent infringement case. I expect to be. Just because the area of surgical robots is really patent dependent. Sometimes patents matter a lot, sometimes they don't matter much. And I also haven't sold a company. That's the other sort of big exit thing that I haven't been involved in. So, you have a question?
Yeah. So how do you manage your time between your company and the university?
It's tough.
Could you repeat that? I couldn't hear.
So the question is, how do you manage your time between the university and the company? So I served for 8 years or 9 years on the Conflict of Interest and Research Committee, which is a committee set up by the University of Nebraska to manage conflicts of interest. So there's lots of dangerous things that can happen. And I shouldn't call them dangerous. But you can imagine some scenarios where I have a company that's going to make profit and make money for me, and I also have students working on a grant inside the university, and I can tell the students, you guys produce and work harder, or I won't let you graduate. You guys got to make me rich, or I won't let you graduate, right? There's all these kinds of possibilities that you can imagine coming up in here. And time is one of them. The University of Nebraska Board of Regents has a policy that states you can do 2 days per month of outside consulting. So you have to come to an agreement with, at some point, you have to come to an agreement with your bosses, which are many, about how you manage your time. The official policy is 2 days per month. So I generally operate on reduced FTE. So I am not a full-time employee of the University of Nebraska. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. It's really kind of complicated, but it's always a negotiation with your bosses. Now I love having this many people here, and this is one of the complaints I often have is the University of Nebraska trying to produce new startup companies? And the answer is universally yes. And the higher you get on the totem pole of the University of Nebraska system, the more they're adamant about how they support innovation at the University of Nebraska, and they want faculty to start companies. But there are challenges, and there are real institutional hurdles to this. And I don't think anybody could ever start a company with 2 days per month. Right? That first month, you can't do it in 2 days. And the second month, you can't do it in 2 days. So what happens there? Is that not outside consulting in the beginning? Is it not, it's a little strange. Now, having complained about the university's been incredibly supportive of our work. And I don't have any major complaints. But I think maybe there's some tuning to be done, is I guess the thing I would complain about. It's easy to complain to us, right? Okay. Yes?
How is it monitored? Like, let's say, from the past point of view, how do you know that you are using up time for, for your faculty job and for your company?
Yeah, well, honestly, my time has never been monitored, right? I mean, since I came in 1998, I'm told to teach a class here or teach a class there. Other than that, no one's ever told me anything about how to use my time. And honestly, the hardest part about being a faculty member, I think, is learning to manage that time very well. I don't know how it's monitored. I don't know if it's monitored, or I don't know if it should be monitored. But I take it very seriously. I have a responsibility. My salary, a portion of my salary is paid by the taxpayer in the state of Nebraska. And I always point to farmers in my hometown who I need to be responsive to them and make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing here. But, how is your time usually monitored would be my question, right? Are you producing journal papers? Are you teaching classes? Are you, I don't know what the answer is to that. Anybody have any comments on how's anybody's time monitored? As faculty. Yes?
I have a sort of a different question. What are the things that the university gets out of your startups? For as far as like, why do they encourage it, and would they encourage one type of business more than another? Like for-profit versus non-profit.
These are good, Brad, questions. But the answer to your first question, how might they benefit? Well, the dream is Stanford had Brin and what's the other guy's name? The two Google dudes. Started a little search engine and had a little IP around it, and then they licensed it to those guys to start this company. And then Stanford sold out at $1 billion, I think. So that's one answer, right? And also, those two guys have created a lot of jobs in the state of California, right? And Stanford has benefited in numerous ways from them being rich and then giving money back to the university. So there's lots and lots of good motives to that. Now, I have a different motive as a faculty member. I can honestly publish papers about surgical robots the rest of my life. I have no doubt I can just publish all the papers I want. But I want to get them out there, and I think they can be important and they can help a lot of people. So there's kind of this transcendental approach to this too. Yes, these are good questions.
So I've heard this same thing you've said about, 2 days a month.
Yeah.
Won't cut it. So did you consider stopping your faculty position and devoting 100% time to the company?
Yeah. Yeah, it's always a consideration. There's lots of nice things about being a faculty member though, right?
But if you did that before you formed the companies, then would the university have any cut of the company?
Well, again, work you do for the university belongs to the university, and you would have to negotiate something with NUtech Ventures to determine what that means. So in our case, the university took an equity position. They own shares in the company, and they have a royalty. So when we sell stuff, they get a cut. And Google sold the equity in Stanford sold their equity in Google for the big money.
$100 million.
$100 million, excuse me. I can only exaggerate by a factor of 10. 100 million is not bad, though.
It's not bad.
Let's keep rolling with the questions here. Why not?
Do they provide you with any startup capital, or do they provide you with just time?
No capital. So you can obviously see that they obviously can't take state money and invest in private things. But there are lots of resources. I can talk about capital raises. I have a bunch of slides about capital raises. But they've been incredibly supportive in lots and lots of ways, but not capital. Yep.
So, Shane, I've said this many times, is that my generation is taking entrepreneurship classes when we're graduate students inside the college of engineering. We're not going to the business school and going to take an entrepreneurship course. So what policies need to change for assistant professors that encourage them to continue startup companies at the early stages of their career, not so much waiting till I'm an associate or full professor? What can we do to encourage more assistant professors?
Well-
Being exposed to this early.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to, in some ways, I don't want to come off wrong, I guess, a little bit. I don't want to speak too authoritatively to these things, but, the one question with assistant professors that ever is obvious is the tenure recognition. And I've sat on P&T committees, and I don't think much of that is valued on P&T committees, right? Again, it's federal dollars, it's journal papers, and it's PhD graduates. And then go to external letters, and what's the pedigree of the external letter writers? It's those kinds of things. Now, I'm oversimplifying that, obviously, and if you ask any P&T committee, they'll say, of course, we value patents and entrepreneurial activity, but I don't know how true that is. And does anybody disagree strongly with that and want to? That's a problem. And that's a very meta question, right? That's, should universities strongly encourage this or should they not? So there's a different role for universities than Oxford had in 1640 or whenever all this university stuff started, right? That's a very different approach. I mentioned the conflict of interest. That's a tough thing that you have to negotiate a little bit. But I don't think those are the biggest impediments to starting companies. I think the biggest impediments to starting companies is this is really hard to start companies. Excuse me, it's easy to start companies. It's really hard to make a company. It's much, much harder to make a company than people realize. So, those are the obvious ones, I think. Anybody have any other ones? Any assistant professors feel crushed by the weight of? Yes?
You said it's mostly more difficult to make, so what do you mean by that? What's going to be the top?
Yeah, well, let me go a little bit. So the question is, why is it so hard to make a company? So let me go through a few more slides here before we go back to questions. I read a lot of books. These are my kids reading books. If you look here, if you want to go to the worst website in the world, go to shanefarritor.com. But one thing I have is a book list there. I've read, 200 books on the subject or something since I started this 10 years ago, maybe. And I bolded some of the ones that I really like and I think are good for faculty interested in startup companies, and answers and talks about a lot of these things. When I teach entrepreneurship classes, I make students read books. And in the engineering college, that really makes them nuts. Reading books is good. This is the slide that I speak to a lot. This is from one of these books by this guy named Derek Sievers. But this is hard for me. I'm a tech guy, and I've always been a tech guy. And I always thought that the answer was better mousetraps. But this is the way it's presented here, and I've come to believe this more and more. So there are two factors, speaking mathematically, that contribute to the success of a startup company. So on the left is the multiplying factor associated with your idea. So if you have a really, really bad idea, you give that a score of -1. And the best idea in the world, you give a score of 20. So when your crazy uncle says, listen, 15 years ago I said, let's start a company and let's do online auctions. And I'll connect people together. That's an out-of-the-ballpark idea. That's a fabulous idea. Let's make a social networking platform where people will take pictures of their lunch and share them with 150 of their closest friends. Right? These are good ideas. But they're worth a multiplying factor of 20. Right? And then there's the other part of it is how well do you execute on that idea? And your crazy uncle didn't do a darn thing with his idea. Nothing. So he gets an execution factor of 1. You multiply those together. You can hand your uncle $20 and say, shut up, I don't want to hear this crap again. Right? That's the value he created, was $20 worth. He had the best idea around, and he didn't do anything about it, so it's worth $20. But if you take a so-so idea and you execute out of the ballpark, you can make your company worth $10 million. So I'm going to mow lawns for people. Some people don't want to mow their lawns. Cardiologists often are too busy doing other stuff. They should do cardiology. I'll mow their lawn. Is that a spectacular idea? Right? That's not. But you can build a $10 million company doing landscape stuff for people, mowing lawns. So this is the part that matters, right? And I'm totally convinced that if you can cure cancer, you might be at 25. You might be at 30. But if you don't tell anybody about it and you don't do anything about it, it's still worthless. So this is the really, really hard part. And when you think about this, think about the companies that are really, really valuable. How about Microsoft? It's a very valuable company. Bill Gates is the richest man in the world. He's close. Think of all the stuff that they have that's valuable, right? They have, first of all, everybody in the room knows how to run Windows now. That's incredibly valuable. If everybody in the universe knows how to use your product and likes using your product, that's really, really valuable, right? They have, somehow they put this, well, they don't do CDs. They put CDs in a box, and then the box gets sent and is packaged and shrink wrapped and is sent to, right? There's a distribution system in place here. There's the Rake School have their stuff here. There's the whole office suite from our alumni, Jeff Rakes, right? That integrates very well. You know, there's so many things that make that company incredibly valuable. And it's, you know, it's, some of them are very, very mundane, but they're really, really important too. So I can talk more about what's hard here, and I can share battle scars. You know, the surgical robot stuff. When I made surgical robots, I really focused on, if I can get this robot in here and we can get it to work once, and we can remove somebody's gallbladder, right? Then I've got where I had to do. Nobody else can do that, right? But now we sit around and we talk about, you know, should there be a connector here, or should the cable be molded in, and should it go, how do you get the cable, this has got to be sterile, how do you plug it into your surgeon console, which is not sterile? You got to flip it down out of the sterile field, and somebody who's not sterile has got to grab it, and you got to make the connection, and, you know, that's the kind of stuff that really, really matters. If you don't get that right, nobody uses your, it doesn't matter how good this might be at removing colon or gallbladder. If you can't plug it in the operating room in a sterile way, there's just so many things that are involved with that. And a lot of it's business stuff. There's so much business stuff that's involved there. Again, you know, I was an undergraduate student here, and the not smart people went to business college because they couldn't do math, right? And so we're smart engineering kids. And you all had that feeling, I'm sure, before, or at least heard that feeling. Maybe you're nicer people than I am, and you've heard other people talk like this. But there's really, really a lot of business aspects to that too. So, what else do I want to talk about? This is what people often look for. What's the most important thing to being successful? It's the team you've assembled. So I couldn't do this by myself. Each of my companies have chief executive officers that handle all the business stuff. They both have engineering degrees, and then have an MBA on top of that, and then they both have tremendous experience in the field. And if either one of them quit, I couldn't do what they do. Even after sort of following them around and working with them for years, I couldn't do what they do. They're key. And no one will invest in our companies without them. They don't care much about me. They want them. Team is the most important thing. The second most important thing is team. The third most important thing is team. Then, the next most important thing is market. Can you sell this? Can you sell a lot of them? How much profit can you make per thing? And then the idea is kind of the last thing. So, you got a question?
Yeah, so how did you get your CEOs who were also business trained?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. There's a couple things I wanted to do. Find a good mentor. I had a good mentor. Remember I mentioned that alumni guy? That was key. It's hard. This is something that NUtech can help us with, and other folks can help us with. But both my CEOs now were not my first CEOs in those companies. And the first CEOs, it's the third in one company and the second in the other, and both of them were good for a while and then didn't work anymore. Find a good mentor, and we can all help you with that. The last thing, I'm kind of getting this signal from people. I think we should make a club. And if you're an administrator in the room, close your ears, because I don't want anybody involved like that. I'd like to start to get together a group of faculty members who are interested in entrepreneurship. And maybe it's just, actually this is Dr. Saraf's idea. Ravi has suggested that we, I don't know, maybe get together once a month for coffee or something, and just talk about stuff and start to make better connections than we have now. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to me, and we'll start a mailing list and We won't ask anybody for permission or for money or anything. We'll just do something that will help, hopefully help with some of this. So I'd be happy to be involved with something like that. If other people are interested in it, let me know.
Shane, do we have any elevator pitch competitions on campus? For
We-
students and faculty?
We have a lot of elevator pitch competitions sponsored by, there's a lot of resources in town people should know about that, again, aren't common knowledge to faculty. The Center for Entrepreneurship has a few of them. And they can tell us more about the list of things, but they just finished one that was up here. They have a couple. They have one over at the stadium that's mostly student focused, quick pitch. And then they just finished one upstairs, which was more advanced and more regional or more national. And that's called
Entrepreneuring Days.
Entrepreneuring Days. So there's a few of those.
And there'll be more.
There'll be more. So,
Shane,
yes.
have you had experience with venture capitalists and how do you advise navigating?
I have had a lot of experience with venture capitalists. So we have 4 involved, formal venture capital firms involved in 2 companies. And we've pitched about 100 or so. And they are a different animal. And I've lots to say about that, but probably no time. They're tough. They're a tough bunch of folks. Rightfully so in some ways. Yes?
I'll ask you a very open-ended question, and maybe this answer is not very easy. But you talked about a good idea and then the execution.
Yes.
And obviously good ideas are dime a dozen,
Yes.
we get all the time. But there has to be some internal assessment if this idea is even worth executing. And how do you, I mean, I know this is a very difficult question to answer, but how did you think about, okay, out of these 20 ideas I had, 6 were very good, but they are very difficult to execute. These 2 are not so good, but they are easier to execute. How do you
Yeah,
even
so
think
you're
about-
right. You're saying there's got to be some value to the idea, right? And you have to decide, are you a 25 or are you a 1 or a -1 even?
And the level of difficulty.
And how can you execute on that? Well, I don't, again, there's not an easy answer. You're right, and I think NUtech does this every time. Should we patent this? Is there a market for it? And there are some metrics and rules and activities you can go through to sort of vet out the value of an idea. But I think in the end, I think people are really bad at this. This is predicting the future, right?
So the whole question of this club, and if I may say something on that, is that a lot of times bouncing the ideas and finding some boards where you can sort of think and bounce out ideas is a very important thing. And in places like California, you may have a good idea, you don't know whether it's executable or not. You can talk to 3 people and figure
Yes.
out whether this is
Yes.
possible or not.
Yes.
And so one of the reasons I think this idea of a club is a very good idea is that we can bounce off things, because the decision on whether this is executable or not
Yes.
is probably the most crucial decision. of
So
all.
the decision about whether you can execute on this idea or not,
Yes.
right? Is it worth executing? Is it worth trying this? Are really, really important things. And then there's nuts and bolts details. I'm going to have a meeting with the CEO who wants to find out more about what should I tell him. A venture capital group is kind of interested in my idea. What should I be ready for? How should I do that? There's lots and lots of stuff I think we can share with each other that will be really, really helpful. So I love the idea, and again, we're really happy to be involved. Let me know. I'd like to get a group together.